Hello, everyone. Uh, in a lot of my videos, I mention that I'm a landscaper and that I work outside for really long hours. And I like to listen to things like podcasts because they go on for a long time. I don't have to change tracks or take my glove off and touch my phone and put my glove back on, which makes everything take forever. And so if I'm on YouTube, I tend to put on stuff like the world-class bullshitters because they'll upload their whole podcast and it's like 2 hours long. And they talk about stuff that I like they bullshit about Star Wars. And that's, they kind of sound like you're hanging out in a Kevin Smith movie. They do. As much as they knock Kevin Smith, it's like hanging around Randall from Clerks. It's like they talk just like him a lot. And one of the ways that they talk like him is in how they just seem to arbitrarily bash the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And when it comes on, even while I have like a weed whacker in my hand, I get like a beat where I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, what? I'm like, why can't these films coexist for some people? I don't understand. I don't understand why there has to be one trilogy. Why? Why can't they coexist? Why can't it just be like, well, it reminds me of Martin Starr's character from Party Down, where he had to differentiate between fantasy and hard sci-fi, and how he couldn't stand the Lord of the Rings. It had to be Star Wars. And how even Star Wars wasn't hard sci-fi because it had fantasy magical elements or some shit like that. And it's like, oh, come on. And they go as far as to go like, those movies suck. They suck. And I'm like, suck. And I just imagine the crew in New Zealand, they got like 100 people behind the camera, with like all the shit they got to hold and work on for the set to be perfect. And then they got like 300 extras that are all like in those potato sacks and they're all covered in the mud. So they look like Middle Earth and whatever. And like, before Peter Jackson can call action, there's like the bullshitters there like, you suck. You suck. This isn't Star Wars. It's like, why do you bother? You suck. It sucks. And like maybe they briefly kind of look up at the hill they're on with the megaphone, like, and they just kind of look at them on the shrug, like, and then they go back to shooting. like, why can't? And they do the whole thing in Clerks 2 where Randall expresses this whole thing where he's like, those movies are so fucking boring. All they did was walk. And he's like, they get to the end and they plunk it in the mountain. Who gives a fuck? And it's like, well, it's, it's a little more than that. And you know that. And he's gaslighting him. We have that word now, thank God. But even so, it seems like those are his real convictions. Like he looks at the Lord of the Rings trilogy with its 13 Oscars and whatnot, and he just goes like, fuck that shit. Like the Ewoks, that's where it's at. I'm like, And like, so how much of the total Star Wars saga can we count with the true classic greats of cinema? We've got A New Hope, we've got Empire Strikes Back that are indisputable. Then we've got Return of the Jedi, which had its problems at the time. A lot of people had problems with the Ewoks and with stuff like, I know it sounds stupid, but Chewbacca's Tarzan yell was a little grating. There was like, Star Wars was already feeling, and I hate to say this word, but like tacky. But there are moments in Jedi that are amazing, that are clearly Lawrence Kasdan's input of like, redeeming the father, Luke having to go a little bit dark to bring the father back up to the light. Those were amazing, or it was an amazing resolution to the saga. But then you get the prequels, and the prequels are universally like bim, bam, ow, 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 ow. It just felt like George Lucas, like if not quite kicking you in the nuts, then like a solid elbow to the lower ribs, just like wham, oh, fuck. Episode 2 especially was like an elbow right to the gut, like boo. And I give you that the Lord of the Rings trilogy has its own prequel trilogy. We have our Hobbit movies. But those are so easy to ignore. We don't have to watch those. We don't acknowledge those. There might be like a Hobbit memes subreddit, maybe, but who cares? I mean, sorry. But prequel memes is hilarious. You know what I mean? That we all agree on that. And that was sort of a universal group therapy for how disappointing the prequels were, I think. You know, there's plenty of prequel defenders in that subreddit, but for the most part, it's kind of like the Senate, Order 66. Like they're making fun of it, you know. It's coarse, it's rough. Like they're making fun of it. And the Hobbit movies, it's like we don't have to. It's like they're not really canon. It's a separate book and all that shit. So we can just focus on the Lord of the Rings movies, those three. And if you want to compare that trilogy to the Star Wars trilogy, first of all, why? Because I'm one of those people that was hoping while I was watching the Lord of the Rings movies that like the Millennium Falcon would swoop over Frodo and Samwise, you know, and be like, you know, you're all clear, guys. He's like shooting at the dragons and like whatever. Jesus, that would be cool. Sorry. And these guys are like, no way, no. Star Wars and Lord of the Rings must never mix. Never the twain shall meet. Well, why not? What the fuck? Who cares? Why not? Why can't the Millennium Falcon go to Middle Earth? Wherever the fuck that is. Like, hello. What's that then? Welcome to the Shire. Mr. Ferryman. Sorry, I'm getting carried away with this. Anyway, like, see, why... with this bullshit. So yeah, the bullshitters should carry on. I'm sorry I name drop for such a small channel. I just like to... That's what I kind of do. I kind of say, carry on, like, you know, the average person likes your shtick and what you do. And the only thing I have to complain about their podcast is that they complain about the Lord of the Rings and sort of pit the two fandoms against each other for no reason. So, anyway, yeah, can't we all just get along?